Good afternoon, this is debbieq, and you're listening to The Right Show. The Right Show is a podcast about all things strange and unusual, especially when it references a death. Today, I'm going to talk about a very interesting case. Before we get into that, I just want to remind you that I have my website, therightshowpodcast.com, where I put up a few pictures to link it with the show. So if you want to see what everyone looks like, or you can go on to Twitter is Bookshop101. I also put pictures up there. At some point I'm gonna have to change it. For now, the Right Shoe Podcast website's the best way, and I'm on all of the podcatcher sites, so you can listen to me there. However you're finding me, it's been fantastic. Today I want to do a case that not only is it disturbing for many reasons, also there is nothing on the internet about it. Nothing. And I mean that. There is one guy, Anton Jones, who wrote a book about it in the 90s. He was like the king of urban fiction. He was actually, I think, the first person of urban fiction. It was like the newest genre, and he was at the forefront of it. Other than him, I can't find anything about this. Anything. Nothing. This is called the Lex Street Massacre. Why is it called the Lex Street Massacre? Because it was a massacre, and it happened on, you guessed it, Lex Street. It happened in West Philadelphia. It's actually, the section is called Mill Creek, and the creek was named, it was actually transformed into a sewer underneath the neighborhood, and that's where the name Mill Creek came from. The people in that neighborhood call it the Bottom. I said, is it still, this neighborhood's pretty bad. And I said, is it still bad there? And they said, yes, it's still, the neighborhood's just not good. It's filled with a lot of crack houses. I mean, and I know this guy that lives in West Philly, and he is like so upstanding and has the nicest things. And he's not a crack dealer. He's a preacher, actually. And I just find it amazing. I can't imagine him living in a section that is bad, so it's got to be little pockets. But the pockets that are bad, this one picture I have of the house where this incident happened does look disgusting. They did change it. They did put up houses instead, like nicer houses. But one of the victim's sisters, Tamika Porter, she was the sister of this guy George Porter, which I'll get into. But she had said, she was on Fox 29 saying, I don't care about these houses. They forgot about the victims. And because of what happened in this case, the victims are kind of lost in this. The only people I've ever heard before I started researching this case was this Faruqi brothers, which I'm getting ahead of myself. I never heard about the victims. I never even knew this happened. And this didn't happen that long ago. It happened December 28th, 2000. When everything turned and everyone in 1999, I remember 1999 leading into 2000, we were sitting there. This is one of the few times I lived outside the city, and I was living in the suburbs. I remember sitting in that house waiting for the change from 1999 to 2000, and everything was just supposed to fall apart. No computers would work. The clocks were going to explode. I mean, it was absolute insanity. The media made it seem like all hell was going to break loose, and nothing happened. 1999 went into 2000, and nothing happened. It was a great night, though. I will tell you that. That was one of the best New Year's Eves I can remember. So the whole year goes, and then we get to December 28th, and this incident happens. And I mean, I don't remember it. I don't remember hearing about it. Somebody had suggested this to me, and the woman who suggested it, when I looked it up, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, it's just bizarre from start to finish. There's a lot of names. The story itself is so confusing that not only do I hope I do it justice, but I have to say that there's so many names. I'm going to try my best with this one because it's so convoluted. I actually was watching a YouTube person do a story about something that was confusing, and they had like a little cork board with names and stuff. I thought that was sharp. I couldn't do that because I'm not visible. I would have to put the cork board on the website. It's intense. So what I'm doing is going to give you a very much glossed over view of this story with as much details as I can for you to understand what exactly happened. If you wanted to read about this on Kindle, there is because you can't get the Lex Street Massacre book anymore. It's not in print. The book is called Equal Verdicts, The True Story of the Lex Street Massacre by Anton Jones. It's on Kindle. Gives you absolutely. I had to read it twice because I couldn't understand it the first time. I really had to go back in and really read it. What happened is unbelievable. It truly is. It just in general, I have to bring it from the top like I always do, and I can't get ahead of myself because this one I'll get too confused. It started December 28th, 2000. There was a crack house at 811 North Lex Street. Now, there were several people smoking crack. There was a few playing Xbox and just sitting around partying, doing what you do. I know actually there's a place down the street right here, 2 blocks away. It's called the Crack Shack. I actually wanted to do a podcast about it. There's several things that keep me from doing it. One, to do a genuine story about it, but there's too many reasons why I can't. I don't want to get myself killed for 30 minutes. Anyway, that's what I think of when I think of how this place was. It had to be the same equivalent. Okay, they're playing their thing. It's a quiet night. It was cold out. Christmas had just passed. One of the people who was to survive this, Yvonne Long, she said they were in the front room playing cards, smoking crack. This guy comes in with there's, I think 2 guys had come into this room. They told him to get downstairs, and they're pointing guns, so there's not much talking. Immediately, you're on the defensive, and she said they all ran downstairs. There was a lot of confusion and yelling. The next thing she knows, and her nephew, Tyrone Long, was in the house at this time. All of a sudden, she said, just massive amount of bullets start flying. So many that she was trying to, I guess defensively, you're trying to put your hand up. Not that it's going to do any good. She was putting her hand up, and she could hear her nephew, Tyrone Long, in the background screaming, "Auntie, help me, Auntie, help me." Those words haunt her forever. Because she survived, but he didn't. They just remember the guy saying something to the fact that we wouldn't have had to do this if you would have cooperated in the first place. She did hear that. There were so many bullets coming in suddenly that they just were trying to get out of the house. They left as suddenly as they came. The carnage that was left behind was not to be believed. Immediately, homicide units were called, backup units, all rushed over to get to the 811 North Lex Street. They get there, cops, the homicide detectives, everyone that saw the aftermath said, when you have one person shot, there's a lot of bodily fluids that are left behind. People don't, when they show these or TV shows and you see a dead body, you don't realize all the fluid that comes out of a person. Your blood, your sweat, your plasma, and your urine. When you have 7, because there was 10 total people shot, 7 died, 3 were to survive. So 7 people on that ground laying, and fluids are coming out. There was so much fluid, they said it was like an inch of fluid just covered the whole, as soon as they walked into the stairway. And there was a cat. They said that cat was so traumatized because it was running around. Animals are sensitive. So this cat was trying to get away from these fluids that he was in. And they said he was just all skitzing out. I guess they removed them. But no wonder people get PTSD and stuff. That site had to really screw somebody up. They immediately they think it's a drug turf war. There was a guy, Willie Davis, and he was older at the time, but when he was younger, he was a part of the Junior Black Mafia. And I guess he was starting to, get middle-aged, and his day, he was like the man, and he wanted to be the man again. So he was trying to get in on the drug corner, and I guess it was lucrative, and he wanted to secure his position again. Well, there was a younger guy named George Porter who would become one of the victims, and he was well respected. He did dirty tricks to get to this top tier. He came in, he would sell good quality stuff for half price. Of course, that's going to run everybody down. And there are people that, everybody knows who the dealers are. They know their corners, and that everyone has their set corners down there. And not just West Philly. There's a couple like Kensington. There's just a couple places where that's what was, I guess, George Porter was taking away. If you're coming in selling your stuff for half price and it's good, everyone's going to go get your stuff, of course. Plus, he had lookouts. So when somebody would come down the road, these lookouts would grab them before they could get to anybody else. People were pissed at George. They thought that he was the cause of this originally, not even originally, right off the bat, this is what they thought probably happened. So they went in with this notion, and automatically, because of how many people died, the pressure was on. I mean, this was the biggest massacre that Philadelphia had ever seen. To get this out of the way, there's a lot of names here that I'm going to be throwing at you. I want to get to the victims, because the victims, there's two people, Veronica Conyers and Tamika Porter. Tamika now goes under the name MEK 46. It's spelled MEK 46ST. She's a rapper, and she's a female rapper, and she says as a female rapper, it's hard to get her name out there. So, I feel for her. I can understand. I've heard that not just from her about being a female rapper, and it's tough to get your stuff played on the radio. It's definitely a male-dominated world. But she's the most vocal, and George Porter was her brother. And she said, it's just unbelievable that the victims have gotten lost in this. And Veronica Conyers, whose son died, and she said from the beginning, my son was not a drug dealer. He merely wanted to play Xbox. Nobody believed her. Nobody. Okay, so these two ladies are the most vocal since this happened, because the victims have gotten lost. I never even heard of the victims. I didn't even know that 7 people had died. And this is their names. Edward Sutter, it's Suder. He was 44 years old. Renette Abrams, she was 33. Calvin C.J. Helton was 19, and that was Veronica Conyers' son, who she would go to court to see justice done, and she literally lost everything because of this. She lost her job, her house, her sobriety, and her mind. And that's what she said, I lost everything. Alfred Goodwin, who is 54. Malik Harris was 15. Tyrone Long was 18. So Edward Sutter, Renette Abrams, George Porter, Calvin C.J. Helton, Alfred Goodwin, Malik Harris, Tyrone Long. The surviving members of this were Bruce Carter, Yvette Long, and Craig Kelly. Sometimes it's written as Greg, but it's Craig. They survived. They had brought them down to try to identify the people that had did this. Now, George Porter's best friend was named Jermel Lewis. He was at the funeral, as was Ezekiel Thomas, Sakone Yoke. These were kids that were all in the neighborhood together. Everyone wanted to see justice done. That was unbelievable. 7 people at one time. And I since learned that there is a difference between mass, spree, and serial killing. I knew there was a difference between mass and serial, obviously. Serial is like Ted Bundy, when you kill, but there's a cool down period between them, but it's usually it's more than 3 victims. Yeah, with spree killing, it should be almost like serial, but it's boom, boom, boom. There's no cool down period, and it's more than 2 people. Like spree would be like the Washington killing, when Washington, D.C., when it was the older guy and a younger guy, and they were running around just shooting people at random, mostly at gas stations. It was pretty big 15, 20 years ago. That's spree. And then we have mass, which is right there, and it involves more than 3 people. So, you know, this was huge, and people wanted to see justice, and the pressure was intense. I've talked to homicide detectives. They said it was just unbelievable. Like, they wanted it yesterday. There was, you know, when there's that much pressure, you just got to get somebody. Now, I understand that, I do, and I just, there's certain tactics that are so unbelievable. It's such a sticky situation. But the thing that happened with Yvette Long, because she would be the one that would positively identify, especially, she would identify 4 individuals, but she would especially identify Jermell Lewis. And again, he was George Porter's best friend. And he was like, I wouldn't do that. But of course they brought Jermell Lewis in. I guess they did the thing where, you know, you're in there for so long. And he said, I had to go to the bathroom, which might sound silly, but I'm telling you, if I had to go to the bathroom, I would jump out a window to go to the bathroom. Like, I cannot have to go to the bathroom. I have to go. I am very crazy about that. And I can imagine it. It's frustrating and scary. He couldn't go to the bathroom. He couldn't do anything. That he was basically there until they said, they have since put somewhat of a stop to that. They can't really do that like they used to. You know, back in the 70s and 80s, it was more, you could really get a confession, but they did get a confession. They had Jermell Lewis sign this confession that was, he claims it wasn't even his own words. He said, I just wanted to get out of there. They kept saying, if you sign this, you'll get out of here. So that's what he did. And then he pointed fingers at 3 others. Allegedly, he claims later that it was on this sheet of paper that he signed. So they, right away, they get together. John Street was the mayor at the time. Lynn Abraham was the DA, and she was a good DA. You know, a lot of people didn't like her, but she was fair, and, you know, she wasn't bad. Mayor John Street, he was well liked. I just think there was pressure, and it just became crazy. So they arrest Hezekiah Thomas, Jermell Lewis, Sakan Youk, it's Youk. I think it's Yoke, and Keontae Perrin. They arrest these 4 individuals for the murder of 7 people. Now, Sakan Yoke in particular, he said when he went, Sakan Yoke, he said he didn't even know he was getting arrested for until they put a wristband on him, and he looks down the charge and it says murder. So obviously he's freaking out. But the tides were already too great, and they, you know, that was it. So for 18 months, they were to sit in jail and await this trial. Now we got to roll it back a little. And like I said, Veronica Conyers was in that courtroom every day, lost her job, everything, because she thought they had the right people. And she said, I just couldn't believe it. Because she said, these were kids I grew up with. She just couldn't believe it. If that's what Yvette Long said, you know, that's what she said. And a psychologist who reviewed this case, he thinks in hindsight that Yvette Long probably had a massive form of PTSD. And that's, you know, she saw like flashes of little like Grizz. There was a tattoo that said Grizz, and then there was a Grizz tattoo on one of the guys. When you have PTSD, the psychologist said that memories become confused, and then you might place one memory with another, and that's why he thinks that, because she was the testimonial eyewitness for this case. After it was all said and done, it really wasn't accurate. I don't think it was any fault of her own. I truly believe it was. I mean, she just saw 7 people killed, and her nephew was one of them. She was being showered with bullets. I'm sure that was a little stressful. How this started getting crazy was, for known that perhaps they didn't have the right people in jail, was when a guy named Shaheen Black got arrested for getting into a fight with this guy named Terrell Smith. Now, Terrell Smith, apparently they got into a fist fight, and Terrell Smith was kicking Shaheen Black's butt. And Shaheen got mad, so he pulled out a 9mm Luger and shot at him. He didn't kill him, but there was spent shell casings on the ground. And when the firearms investigation unit picked it up, they called down and they said, look, we have a match. Those spent shell casings were a match to the gun that was used at the Lex Street Massacre. Right away, no matter what was going on, all of the lawyers said that the defense should have been called and told this. They were just, and it wasn't a bunch of idiots. Like, these were highly regarded lawyers that were in charge of this. The prosecutor, for example, Roger King, he was a well-respected prosecutor. Like, this wasn't somebody just some half-assed lawyer. He was a good lawyer. And it was a wheel turning, and it couldn't go backwards. Until a Daily News reporter named Teresa Conroy, she got wind of what was to come next, and she wrote an article in the paper about it. When they brought Shaheen Black in to interview him, and he was arrested because of he said, like, you just shot at this guy and your bullets matched the bullets that were at Lex Street. He threw up as soon as he walked into the room. And not only did that happen, but he started rambling. I want to speak to my grandmother. I want to speak to my girlfriend and her children. Yeah, he started telling a story that this guy, Charles McLaren, was with him, and when his mask came off, he started shooting. And he was rambling, and he kept getting sick, like physically sick. So they actually, because of his demeanor and everything, and the way he wasn't making sense, but he was making sense. He was saying things that happened at Lex Street that night. The way he was saying it and the way he was behaving, I think he was just spazzing out because he knew what he had done. But meantime, the homicide detectives were like, this guy's a psychotic lunatic. He's a suicidal lunatic. And they kicked him out of the interrogation room. Now, when Teresa Conroy got wind of this, because she said whatever the interview was about, it was so, he knew what was happening on Lex Street. And when she said, this guy Jamel Lewis, who says he's innocent, who does not seem like he knows what happened, the other guys are screaming that they don't know what happened, and things are looking a little strange at this point. So for 18 months, these 4 guys, Ezekiel Thomas, Jamel Lewis, Sakun Yauk, and Keontae Perron, they were in jail. 18 months goes by. All of a sudden, they realize they don't have a case against them. They let them go. They actually gave them bail at first, which they said is just unusual. So as soon as that happened, then they released them. Then they sued the city $1.9 million, and they won. Sakun Yauk said, listen, we each got $475,000 off all that was after all was said and done. But my name was toast. Like, I couldn't get a job because what happened was they call it Knoll Pros, NOLLEPROS, and Knoll is one word, pros, PROS is another word. It's two separate words. It's a legal term that means no longer prosecuting. Doesn't mean not guilty. Doesn't say anything but we are no longer prosecuting. So this murder charge was still on his record. And it drove him crazy. Like he said, that $475,000 just paid for the lawyer fees. Can you imagine? You know what a lawyer is when you get like a DUI or something like that and you have to pay all that money to the lawyers or anything. Lawyers are a fortune. Like when I had to go to family court years back, they were just ridiculous. The amount of money for like a letter was just outrageous. But the point is that, he had to give that $475,000. It just about covered what he owed his family for the lawyer's fees. And then he could still never really move forth except, I guess, drugs and stuff, which it sucks. So that happens and that's a mess. So now nobody's trusting, like the Veronica Conyers and Tamika Porter. They're like, look, you brought in a whole new fourth set of guys because they brought in Bruce Vaney, who in turn for a 15 to 30 year plea deal gave the names of Dawad and Khalid Faruqi and Shaheen Black. And Shaheen Black, out of all four, seems to be the main guy. He is very hostile. There's an interview at the end of the novel, the Equal Verdicts novel Jones had done, and it is unbelievable. Antoine Jones just says, like, he really was, like, a likable guy, and yet at the same time, he was, like, a stone cold, desensitized person. He said he was the most desensitized person they'd ever met. And there is an instance where he asks him, about the killings, and he just goes back and forth and he's all over the place. And you can see that the anger in him, it's eating him alive. I don't know how long ago the interview was done, but his soul is just eaten away at. And he keeps saying, like, how ridiculous the Faruqi brothers are, and Khalid is just, he's on the slow juice and he doesn't even make sense anymore. But it seems like he's not that much better either. If this is even true about the other guys, the anger in him is severe. They bring Shaheen Black, Dawad and Khalid Faruqi, and Bruce Vaney to trial. And everyone's like, are these the right killers? What's going on? It doesn't make any sense. The ballistics match, and they did legitimately confess to get the death penalty off the table. And since Bruce had confessed and gave the names of the other guys, he got the 15 to 30 year sentence. It's such a sad tale. I really glossed over so much of it because it is the story. I strongly recommend, if you want to look more into this story, you should either read the court transcripts. They are online. You can always get court transcripts. You just have to have the names of whoever you want the transcripts from. Also, Equal Verdict, it's on a Kindle. It's very good because it goes through not only this story, but it goes through really to how, like, to the pinpoint of what happened. I've glossed over it because the names and everything for a podcast, it's just not, it's too intense for a 30-minute podcast. I just thought it was outstanding that there's 7 people that died. There was a massacre, and I never even heard of it when it happened. I couldn't find anything about it except for the court transcripts in the one book. That to me was amazing. And then when I read about this Veronica Conyers, because they asked several of the people the reporters who were there, who did you feel the most bad for? Because Veronica Conyers kept saying, my son, Calvin C.J. Helton, was no drug addict. He was no drug dealer. And even the one reporter said in the beginning, I didn't believe it. I just thought maybe she was a proud mother. But it turns out that it was true. This kid was completely just there to play with Xbox, and that's it. And he got killed for that. And when I get to the reason this all happened, this is going to floor everybody, because I still can't believe it. Like I said, originally everyone thought it was a drug deal gone bad. And to this day, Shaheen Black claims, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Neither of those, it's not a drug deal, nor is it about what they finally said it was about. But the way that this Shaheen Black seems like a hothead, and what happened was Shaheen Black traded a Chevy Corsica, yes, a car, and $300 for George Porter's Dodge Intrepid. He had George Porter had a Dodge Intrepid that Black wanted, but Porter didn't know how to use a stick shift. So who's ever tried to use a stick shift and doesn't know how to use one? What happens? The clutch burns out immediately. When I was learning how to drive, somebody tried to teach me how to do drive a stick shift, and I burnt the clutch out of this BMW. Oh my God, he was so mad. It's not hard to do. So he burnt this clutch out of the Dodge. George went to David Faruqi and traded a pistol for the Dodge Intrepid. Porter still had an extra set of keys, so he basically got his car back anyway. And when Black heard about this, he was furious because Porter didn't want to pay for the damaged clutch. So Black freaked out. When they walked into the house, Dawad Faruqi, who he, in his first confession, says the name Charles McLaren. And this was one part of the story I could never understand, and I'm still baffled. He said that when he went in with Charles McLaren, his mask fell down. But Dawad Faruqi said his face mask fell down. So I don't know, this guy, Charles, was never charged. Nothing ever happened with him. That part of the story is still a mystery to me. Maybe Shaheen Black was a little confused, because they said it was definitely the Faruqi brothers together. It was Dawad and Khalid, So when Dawad walked in and his face mask fell down, he freaked, and that's when the shooting started. So this whole massacre started because of a clutch and the fact that his face mask had fallen, and they could positively identify him, which they did. I think they would have done anyway. It's just unbelievable to me. They're on YouTube. They have Tamika Porter, the Mech 46, and she says, the victims, her brother, George Porter, was forgotten about, and the victims were. I have to agree. I mean, there's, you don't hear about them. You don't even hear about the story, but when you do, you hear about the crazy reason why with the car. And then you hear about how the initial 4 people who won the $1.9 million settlement, how that happened. You don't hear about the victims anymore. And she said, they built these houses which are plastic, and it means nothing to her because her brother is dead. I can understand it. Veronica Conyers, she lost her mind. Her son died. It's a sad tale. It really is. It's unbelievable, but it's sad. That was the story that I could tell to the best, because I wanted that out there, because I don't see anything about the Lex Street Massacre, and see how that got so glossed over. I guess, I don't know, the city must have squashed it down, way down, because there is not, even when I put in YouTube, like Lex Street documentary came up, but there was no Lex Street documentary, so I'm wondering if it was taken off. I don't know. I just know I couldn't find anything about it. No, nothing. So for the Lex Street Massacre, for all those involved, for all the victims, the people that are hurt, the initial people that were charged and it wasn't them, that one's for you. That's definitely a right show. It's strange and unusual, times 10. And this is Debbie Q, and you're listening to The Right Show. I will be coming up, definitely, with more episodes. Don't you think I forget you guys for a second. I am constantly thinking of really good cases. This one, again, I had to really gloss over it. I am always thinking of new cases to put on here, and they'll be coming at you as quick as I can get them. This is Debbie Q, and you're listening to The Right Show.